Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Slice of the Reef, our new podcast that demystifies the art of saltwater fish keeping. My name is Billy.
And I'm Giancarlo, aka Banana or Fishy Fish. We're going to be your guides today into the amazing world beneath the waves, but also in the box in your living room. Crazy, huh?
Enjoy and easy reefing.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in again for our 3-part episode on zoanthids and pellies. We are here once again with Billy and Jay. My name is, of course, Giancarlo /Fishy Fish / Banana. And we're going to dive into more questions about zoas and finish off things that we didn't get into last time. Let's start off with a good one. Jay, I've got a question for you. When you're buying zoas, what's the biggest thing you look out for?
Well, first of all, I buy stuff. And nowadays, I just buy stuff in duplicate, just to make sure I got that backstop. But no, at the end of the day, you want to look for obvious stuff. Are there any sort of egg spirals on the base? Does it look like it's color shifting or so naturally colored, or does the pigmentation look about correct on it? You want to see nice extension out of it. Obviously, gaping mouth would be a red flag unless the lights just came on or something. Beyond that, you also want to check the stalk as much as possible. I know we mentioned zoopox before. It's really obvious when zoanthids have it. When they're starting to get it, that's a little bit more difficult to call. But these are just things that you want to take a look at. But beyond that, if I see something I like and it's $20, hey, cool. If I see something I like and it's $100, well, if I love it, I'll buy it. So, but that's really mostly what I'm looking for at the end of the day. And then, as all collectors, I have my ISO in search of list where my different friends that I'd speak with across the country, that are doing their own thing, and sometimes we'll go months without talking to them. Hey, what's up? Oh, this, that, and the other. How are the kids doing? And then I slip them the list, and if they have a couple things on there, they're like, hey, I got X, Y, and Z, and it's all right, great, let's trade. So yeah, it's that impulse buy versus the longer sort of what are you looking for approach.
Yeah, very fair. For beginners, I would say watch out for the color white or anything that looks faded, because there usually isn't the zoas usually aren't white by nature. It means they're bleaching or losing their zooxanthellae. If any of the polyps are closed, that would be suspicious. If all of them are closed and the lights are on, yeah, extra suspicious. Let's see what else.
All the shops are closed. Oh
man,
what a horse.
Like Jay said, if there's any weird stuff clinging to them that's not the zoa flesh, be really skeptical. Shit, I had one more. I forget what it was.
Oh, I got 2 for you. The first one, blue clove polyps. Which are, I hate to say it, but they're the herpes of the aquarium world, where that's something you just don't want in your system. Blue clove polyps, they look really pretty. They present as just this little bright blue spot. If you're looking at them and they're closed up, it actually looks like a tiny fine mesh net, like on the zoa stalk. And they most commonly will sneak in with zoanthids. The stuff is it's a pox. It is the worst thing you can deal with. There is treatment for it, but it's a pain in the butt. So you want to make sure that if you have hitchhikers coming in, that it's specifically not blue clove polyps, but there's also brown ones and stuff like that. That's one where I might want spiders or nudies before I get that stuff in my system. So. And then the second one is sponges as well. This is more wild collected stuff and sometimes maricultured stuff. If something comes in with a sponge, a weak hydrogen peroxide bath will generally take care of that. A trusty soft toothbrush will finish the job. So, Billy, were you able to come up with that art thing?
No, that's awesome. No, I forgot it. But I was going to say I moved some of my zoas from my main tank to the frag tank, and a sponge actually overtook them. It wasn't goking them out, but it definitely did not look cool. It was like this weird white gauzy stuff draped all over my zoas. And luckily, just exposing them to air, like when I was looking at them, actually knocked them out. So sometimes the sponges are really easy to kill off. Aptasia is kind of an obvious one. A lot of times, I'll see like a really cool big like colony rock of zoas that was imported from the wild. And then right smack dab in the middle, there's a tiny little Aptasia. So just keep a lookout for that. It's a lot easier to screen for Aptasia when the coral, when the polyps are closed. So that's kind of a catch-22. If it's closed, then it might be sick.
Oh yeah, 100%. What do you?
I would say just generally be wary of buying like larger mariculture colonies, because you're also generally getting rock. That rock might be porous. At this point, like, people shouldn't be overly concerned about bristleworms and stuff like that. But, some of those pieces, you can never be all too certain what else is coming in. So I generally avoid anything on a rock. Or if I don't have a choice, then that's why I quarantine stuff before it ever hits the display or the farms.
Yeah, very fair. So there's a lot of early red flags you can look for when you're getting your first few zoa colonies. And as Jay mentioned, there's a whole lovely little menagerie of things that can come in on zoas that you'll learn to look for and dip for over time.
It's a lot of fun. Zoas are their whole world. What do you feed your zoas, Jay? What do you do?
Good question there. So I remember, I think even before the last podcast started, you guys were talking about phosphates and reefroids, or that may have been a separate conversation. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, phosphates, reefroids is a great product. I know for some people it drives their phosphates through the roof. I've found that it triggers the feeding response in my zoas. So the other part of it is I put a lot of nutrition into the aquarium, and so what that looks like specifically, and this was something that I'd actually struggled with the first 18 months after I moved. I honestly did not have a lot of fish in my trough. I had a big Malcooloseps tang. I still have him. I bought him from Reef to Reefer price 7 or 8 years ago. He's never gotten really big. He's like 7 or 8 inches. But I had him in there, and then Tomini tang, and then that was really it. With the kids and the move and the scaling up, I didn't really have any money where I could just like roll into fish or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was struggling, like pre-move, like stuff was growing like gangbusters. I could cut stuff, and then I could cut stuff again 4 or 5 weeks later. And I really hit a wall where stuff was just like everything was in a stall. Nothing was really growing. I was doing all the stuff I've been doing before, and I'm like, why is this not working? And I thought on it. And then I came to realize, well, it really is a question of nutrition. In the house before I moved, I had an Achilles hybrid, I had an Achilles, I had the Malcooloseps, and then I had a Fowleri. I also had a pair of Genicanthus angels. I had a bunch of dartfish. I had a squad of wrasses. Well, some of these guys went up to the display, and then, I lost some of those in the display. Some of them I gave away. So I tried adding mollies. I acclimated them, and I thought, like, this is going to be great. And it turns out that long-term, that was not the key to success. Also, mollies jump. For those of you that are unaware, I stepped on a couple of them on the floor, and I'm like, all right, this is done. So I ended up getting 8 or 9 Royal Grammas from my buddy. I put those in there, and so I was able to start bumping up the nutrition. And so what is it? It's that PE, mysis, the good oily stuff. It's brine shrimp, it's Formula 2. And since then, I had to thin out the display. I brought down 5 of these gold striped damsels that had gotten very large. Each one of them was probably 2 or 3 inches, and they were great citizens in the display. They're great in the farm. They eat a ton of food. They don't murder each other like the green chromis do. And so really now I started this probably like 6-7 months ago, where like each night I'm going down there, and then in addition to prepared food, which I use Spectrum pellets, which I think is just hands down the best prepared food out there, especially if you're keeping tangs and angels. It will really color those guys up.
Is that New Life Spectrum?
Yes.
Me too.
Yeah, I think that is hands down. And even picky fish, idols and Achilles and stuff like that, they seem to do really well by it. So that's a product I love. So in addition to those prepared foods where I'm putting in, a tablespoon or two a day of prepared foods at different point in the day, I'm also doing, several cubes of Formula 2, a cube of Formula 1, a nice chunk of mysis, and a nice chunk of brine shrimp as well. And so, for as much as some of these larger zoanthids, that triggers their feeding response because I'll kill the pumps, you'll see them grab food, but then also that slurry, from these frozen foods, because I thaw the food in a few ounces of water. Like that slurry is really what goes a long way to feeding these zoanthids. So, and then twice a week I will do the Reefroids where I'll kill the pumps and I'll mix it up and then I'll broadcast feed. But with how I have stuff laid out, like it is broadcast feeding, but it's kind of targeting because I can just do a big run at a time and hit a bunch of polyps. So all of those things, phyto, I need a new phyto culture so I can start growing it again. But phyto is obviously a good thing to put in there. And then I used a lot of freeze-dried cyclopes. I ran out of that product a little while ago. It's sort of a backstop to the Reefroids. I feel like the Reefroids is probably a slightly better product. The cyclopes, whatever. So, and really at the end of the day, what you're doing is, you're getting nutrition in there where it's a bunch of different, size stuff, Obviously, microzoanthids are not going to be grabbing, chunks of mysis and eating them, but like a pink constellation will. In that same vein, those microzoas, which, they need a smaller particulate, they're either getting stuff from the slurry, they're getting the Reefroids, or, quite honestly, they're getting the excrement from the fish. So, that's when we talked about nutrition last time, when we were wrapping up the last episode, and we talked about really getting growth out of the zoanthids and stuff. That's really what it comes down to.
Very awesome. One of the few corals that you can really skyrocket the growth of by just increasing not the nutrient totals, but the nutrient output, or like the available nutrients.
Well, and so that being the case, I'll add, and we talked about this too, nutrition and nutrients. One is the indirect measurement of the other. There's one fellow I was talking to on Reef to Reef where he ran a low nutrient tank because his nutrient export was so efficient, but he fed very heavily and he did very well with zoanthids in that tank. So that's an interesting talking point that I wish people would really discuss more, because nutrients, like you can have high nitrates and high phosphates sitting in the aquarium and be putting food in there and whatever, that's not inherently beneficial to the zoanthid, and hence the whole like dirty water talking point, like it's food they want, not just the high nutrients.
Exactly. So one more question before we get into the Q&A. Have you ever used or heard people using vitamin C for zoanthids specifically?
Yeah, so shout out to my buddy Ice Mountain from Reef to Reef back in 2017, 2018, before he left to Texas to do his doctor stuff. I say that banana. There's residency. That's what I'm looking for. He was with his parents up by Elgin, and I go up there and visit, and he was one of those guys where he always had the newest, latest and greatest strains, whatever, and he could cut stuff and it would just grow like crazy for him. And so we were discussing it, and he mentioned vitamin C dosing. I'm like, all right, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you're basically carbon loading the system. You're creating more nitrifying bacteria. And at the end of the day, like, it's healthy for the zoanthids too. So, I am not Randy Farley Holmes from Reef to Reef. I cannot explain the finer aspects of skeletogenesis or, carbon dosing. But the basic principle is that you're upping the threshold of these nitrifying bacteria, which once again, it can depress the nutrients in the system. It can lower your nitrates, it can lower your phosphates, but by the same token, I believe it creates a situation where the corals can pull more hydrogen out of the water for skeleton building. Are any of you guys familiar on the finer points of this or no?
I am not. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, and so that's the thing. That's why everyone has to admit when they get to the point where they're far enough on the branch where they they don't know. But so the anecdotal evidence that I can absolutely share with you is that his stuff grew like crazy. It healed really well. So I started replicating that using buffered sodium acerbate. I believe that's the fancy name for vitamin C. But yeah, so there's buffered and there's unbuffered. I believe the buffered version can ultimately affect your alkalinity as well over the grand scheme of things. So it's just one of those things you have to keep an eye on. But in short, I used it as part of my regimen for like 7 or 8 months. I did not have like the same results. The fellow's name was Fahad. I did not have the same results as him. But that being said, like, I also, I didn't lose anything by it. So it's one of those things where now that I sort of have the nutrition import figured out, my nutrient export figured out, it is one of those things that I would like to revisit more. In principle, it is also supposed to just help with the overall health of the zoanthids. So that's about as useful as I can be in that direction.
All good.
It works perfect.
Works for us. Okay. So first question on the list is from Kali. Any experience with Astorina starfish eating zoas?
We got to do this fish of the week, right?
So this is a fun one, right? Because, you get the whole, they don't eat zoanthids. And then you get the art people that say, yes, every one of them eats zoanthids. And then you get the other one that says, well, they only eat a zoanthid if it's die. And, they're just, and so what's the right answer there? Well, I say, get a harlequin shrimp, kill them all, let God sort them out, and don't worry about it, because harlequin shrimp are dope as hell, especially when they're,
They really are. They're so cool.
Yeah, I mean, look, I splurged. I have 3 or 4 of them in my farm. I actually was able to take a picture of one, I don't know, a few months ago. I went downstairs before the lights were on, and I was looking around, and I saw him up top just chilling, and I'm like, holy hell, that is why we do saltwater. That is the coolest thing. If it wasn't 5:30 in the morning and I was just like chilling out down here, this would be like so cool. But yeah, it's obviously one of those things where they're nocturnal, they're somewhat reclusive, whatever. But yes, Astorina starfish. The other thing you'll see too is some people are like, oh, the light colored ones are the bad ones. The brown bodied ones are the ones with markings are fine. At the end of the day, I don't have any in my farm. And then even the display, at some point, I do have some in there, but not many. and I will probably get Harlequin to go in there eventually as well. They're just one of those things where if you don't have them in there, do they have a role to play as part of your cleanup crew? Yeah, probably. But nothing's more disheartening than just, go down and you're going to look at this new frag you bought and, it's a single polyp because it's a high end. And then you look at it and there's just a big fat old Asterina star sitting right on top of it. And you just know in your heart of hearts, that thing's effed. It's not coming back. That zoanthid is going to die. You just lost $120 because this inconsequential little starfish just wanted to have a snack.
Has that happened to you specifically, or is that an anecdote? Or
I mean, you tell me, Billy. What do you think?
No, I don't think it has.
Oh boy. Yeah. So no. Look. At the end of the day, it's better to be safe than sorry. You as a reef keeper, you are the gatekeeper for your aquarium. All the life that goes in there, you're responsible for, be it good or bad, like Asterina stars. But they're one of those things where I actually have to buy chocolate chip starfish that I throw in the bottom of my farm, and then the Harlequin shrimp will slowly eat those things. But you know what? I might have 99 problems, but Asterina stars chewing on my zoanthids are not one of them.
Very nice. The late and great Jake Adams had kind of a rant about this. He believes that most of the quote-unquote Asterinas in the hobby are actually a different species that's much less likely to eat coral. So if you see one in your tank or if you see one on a frag, they're really easy to just pull off, and you don't have to freak out too much because the odds that you have an experience like Jay, I think he was very unlucky. He also has millions of zoas, so the odds that one of them would have a starfish on him is relatively high.
And I've been doing it a long, long time.
Yeah. So don't despair. And if you do see them eating your corals, let us know, because you are very, very unlucky, like Jay.
No, I mean, those things are great for cleanup crews. And if you're running a fowler or something like that, holy hell, that's one of the first things I get in there because, they are great. They're not, particularly ugly. And I would say that, Jake Adams, that's probably the appropriate appraisal of the situation. Most of them are probably benign and they're not going to mess with the zoanthid. But I mean, look, I've had that happen and I've had it happen more than one time, which is why I'm willing to drop a $50-$60 shrimp in there that I'll only get to see at 5:30 in the morning. I go down, the lights are all off. So
we do recommend.
It's actually pretty cool. Asterinas are, I don't know why, but I find it really satisfying watching them walk across the glass at night.
They're cute.
I don't know. I like them. They're cute. They're little starfish, and they're the only starfish that almost everyone can keep, right? Because other ones like the Linkias and stabs, if things eventually die out, Asterinas are forever.
They're cute, man. Sometimes they only have one or two arms, or you get one where split funny, and you're like, oh, that's cute.
Oh yeah, little buddy. Oh, look at it go.
I'm not hating on them. I just, I can't have them. So
yeah,
those and me angelfish.
Oh well, yeah, definitely don't keep angels with their zoas because they'll eat those things up like popcorn. Next question, who wins my precious SPS or my zoas? I would rather not have zoas winning fights with my SPS.
I mean, so at the end of the day, are we talking about physical space where they're growing into each other, or are we talking about chemical warfare between the two?
Physical space, I believe.
Well,
yeah, I think if you have zoas and SPS touching, right, or if you have a coral and they have an SPS next to a zoa, who wins?
Zoas.
I think if it's branching out, the SPS wins, but if it's just a frag, the zoa, right?
I mean, I say it's contingent on the zoa. At the end of the day, if you have an SP, a chunk of SPS in there, and it's established and it's growing, whatever, I don't think that the zoanthid is necessarily going to grow up the stalk of the SPS in the same fashion as say those blue clove polyps I was talking about earlier. Those things will grow over, and
they don't care.
There are certain zoanthids which, are chokers where they'll, fill any void and then choke stuff out. And that's your Pandoras, and your Nirvanas and some of those large bodied, zoanthids that are commonly, misidentified as pallies. But for the most, and so what I would say is this: in my display, one of my rock structures, I have some zoanthids up there, up on there, but the other rock structures, mainly the ones where I keep like my chalices and SPS and euphyllias and stuff like that. Like I don't put zoanthids up on those rock structures. I generally tend to keep the zoanthids actually on the bottom of the aquarium. And so if anyone does a deep dive into Instagram or just looks at the hashtag LittleBigReef on Instagram, you'll see pictures of the 220 gallon where I had the vast majority of that Zoa collection like just on the bottom of that tank on grow out plates. And it was great because it was just a colored carpet of different zoanthids and whatever. And then I never really had that issue with them growing into SPS or stuff like that. So, in short, if we're talking about a small, SPS frag that's newly acquired, and we're talking about an established colony of nirvanas, yeah, they're probably going to run right over that thing in the course of time. But, if we're talking about an established SPS colony and you got some orange bam-bams hanging out around it, highly unlikely those orange bam-bams are going to start choking it out, killing tissue or growing up onto the skeleton.
Yeah.
Actually, I have some, I think they're punk rockers. So I like punk rockers, but I have some zoas fighting my Monty currently. My beach pond Monty is currently at war with some zoas.
Okay.
And it's pretty cool watching them grow just because I see the Monty trying to encrust over the zoas, but the zoa heads open up to the point that they're actually winning against the Monty. And then I have the exact same thing happening with the same type of zoa on another side, on another rock, but it's going up against, say, Gani instead of a Monty.
They're splitting attention. That's a classic strategic error.
They're trying to win.
So long story short, it's hard to really answer that concretely. The best case scenario is to not have coral warfare at all. So I keep all my zoas isolated on their own little rocks. It's easier to make a zoa garden that way too because it's self-contained. And you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. If they do start fighting with each other, the bigger colony or the one with the most momentum will typically win out.
Yeah.
And so Banana makes an interesting point there. That beach bum is a slow grower Monty. It is more of an encruster and not so much like a plating or a whirling one. So yeah, I could see them having it out. Now that you mentioned that, I guess Montipora probably are the most notable exception to that. I have had larger pally type zoanthids grow up against like Monty cap. I forget if it was like green orange or whatever, but it did affect the growth around that side where the Monty, like the lip started curling in and whatever, and then it just wasn't really trying to grow in that direction anymore. But to that end, it's not like it was going to run over the zoanthid or the zoanthid was going to like start colonizing and growing out its tissue. The Gani, that's interesting because it's got that stone. It's obviously got that, base to it. So, I could see some potential problems there.
Yeah, it's tricky zoas.
Fair enough.
Well, more, yeah.
Next question, I actually have a similar question to this. It's from Snias. Are palithoas and zoanthids related? They look so similar. And I also want to call out that you mentioned there are some zoas that are misclassified or misidentified as palithoas. Are there good examples of that? Yeah.
Okay. So, once again, I am a few credits shy of my degree in, zoology and, specifically, marine biology and all that stuff. So it's my understanding, the very broadest of the sense, that when we talk about protopallies, we talk about those yellow pretty consistently. They're the yellow things with the very like wiry skirts, whatever. When we talk about Paleothella, we're talking about things like Captain Jerks, Captain America, boy, I'm going to draw a blank here. Any of the nuclear duck. So those, and so when you compare those, and so there's a fellow that's been fighting this fight on Reef to Reef where people ask for an ID and he throws down like the Latin species name every single time. And I like his tenacity, even if he knows that that's not what people are asking. But that guy is actually identifying and saying, hey, this is this or this is that. Now, Billy obviously shared a picture here. That's your brown button polyps, or also sometimes called Texas trash. And in that same vein, form-wise, it is slightly different than like a Captain America. But what's in that picture there? In a Captain America, they have like that, it's something with the tissue and whatever. And then even like Grandis pallies are another example where like the tissue, and if you've ever fragged into these, like the tissue is very different than zoanthid tissue. So it's my understanding that like those are your true pallies. And then as we were talking about like utter chaos, but other examples, would be like pink zippers, frozen Armageddons, armor of God, basically any of these like larger zoanthids, people refer to them as pallies. And because none of us, are, well, I shouldn't say none of us are marine biologists, but, the vast majority of us just, don't really know. You'll say, oh, that's a zoanthid, that's a pally, whatever. But it's my understanding, kind of like tangs, where there's a couple different kinds. You've got zoanthids that are the micro, where what those look like. You've got zoanthids like bam bams, where what that looks like. But then you also have things like rainbow infusion or sunny D's. Those are also zoanthid. And then, these larger ones that I was talking about, they are ice Armageddons, the pink zippers, the utter cast. Those are actually zoanthids as well, but we just casually refer to them as pallies.
I just called my utter chaos pallies. So thank you for correcting me. I learned something today.
Okay, well, but I might be wrong here too. I can read and think critically, but by all means, that's my understanding. But that's also, those are different like species of zoanthid.
Yeah, no, very true.
So there you go. So as far as they're all related, well, hey, we're all made of stardust and carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. So
allegedly, I don't believe in nitrogen. Just kidding.
It's not a believer. Nitrogen is a conspiracy made up by the government to keep that.
He's fully silent. I think I killed him. Jay, you okay?
Oh yeah, no, I'm fine. That took a certain amount of concentration there to get that out. So I just like for a moment. No, I was actually thinking of I was actually thinking of the Mr. Burns as a space alien episode. This came out in probably like 1997 or 1998. It's vintage Simpsons. Homer sees an alien. It's got a crossover with the X-Files. So you have David Duchovny and the Arwen show up and whatever. And in the first commercial break, they had the preview for the special edition of Star Wars that was being released. But later on, you have Dr. I can't think it's like Hubert something, Dr. Hibbert. And he's talking to Homer Simpson. He's like, oh, are they carbon-based or are they silicone-based? And Homer Simpson is like, oh, they're xylophone.
Oh.
And so that Homer Simpson line was what was running through my head.
What did you say? There's xylophone? Xylophone?
Well,
Xylophone.
I mean,
Xylophone.
Homer was just trying to repeat what he was saying, but obviously he had no idea. So
it's funny. So long story short, it's all one big genetic soup. They're all
the same thing.
Palithoa are more likely, at least anecdotally, to contain higher levels of palytoxin, or at least you should be more careful around them because they even look more dangerous. But there's a really wide spectrum of zoa-like critters in the ocean. All of them are Cnidaria, which are like the phylum, I think, that houses all coral life, and anemones, and jellyfish, maybe. Does that include jellyfish? I don't know. But they're all just like certain types of polyps, soft coral polyps, usually colonial, but that's all I really know.
And what I will add to that, just to close out that thought, is that like you can tell the difference when you're cutting into Captain America or like a Beauty and the Beast or even any of the death ones. Like that tissue is just different. And, it's when it releases material, like it's much more like concentrated. You think about like different oil and like engines and like that different way. I'm searching for the viscosity. Like there's a different viscosity when you cut the tissues.
The scientific term is a goop factor, I believe.
A goop factor.
Yeah, the stuff you want to rub in your eyes and lick off the cutting surface. So
yeah, don't do that. Unless you really need to get to the hospital and now. But you can just drive to the hospital by yourself. You don't have to.
Well, we talked about before, paleotoxin is among the many different things that, can happen. Aside from that, like vibro, whatchamacallit, which I know someone that got that one time too. And that was terrible for them. But yeah, you don't want a paleotoxin.
Awful. All right, next question. When will stratosphere zoas not be $9 million per polyp?
Oh, I'm both happy and flabbergasted to say we are living in 2023, folks. If you want, I could go get you as many stratospheres as you want at $300 a polyp, which is probably still overpriced at this point. But listen, those are going to be as common and as readily available as GMKs. And the real kicker is that I have a lot of friends that are sitting on them right now that bought in at a high level. And because we're in summertime and this is our first like really truly regular dead season for the industry, which you have to throw out the last like 3 years of the pandemic because that wasn't how any of this normally is historically, not only for fish stores but even the pet industry as a whole. The summer is your off time because people are going on vacation, they're not spending money, whatever. I have a lot of friends that are sitting on stratospheres that are hoping this fall they are going to be able to get something for them.
Yeah. They're going to follow the trend that all expensive coral follows. SPS and Zoas alike. The first year, they half in price, and they half in price again. And then they're like a fraction of what they were before.
Well, and so, GMKs aside, stratospheres, this is actually a really interesting conversation I was having with a friend, Doc Reefer, on Instagram, where he was talking about, finding some of these like ultra rare, perhaps, out of the hobby zoanthids that people can't get anymore. And he's like, well, what about stratospheres? And I told him, well, stratospheres, the only reason why stratospheres attain these mythical status was because Indo was shut down. And, so there's a whole segment of hobbyists, and I know he's been reefing for a while, but there's a whole segment of these hobbyists that, are maybe 5 or 6 years in at this point, which means that they, starting like 2017 or 2018. Well, at that point, Indo was already shut down, and the stratospheres are predominantly collected in the Indonesian region, along with a lot of the stratocasters. Really, any of those yellow-black zoas with like the blue or purple-colored skirts, those are all coming out of Indonesia. Well, they were not exporting there. They had the one lawmaker, and she had like closed everything down, and so they just weren't doing that. So that's why you had those stratospheres come in like 2014, 2015, I want to say. And then people come to oblivion. And then once they were gone, there was just no more of them. It's kind of our situation right now with like flame wrasses and potter's angels, which after Hawaii closed down, like you can't get those. And even yellow tangs to a lesser extent, although obviously, with biota and some of these different outfits, we have aquaculture options. But that being the case, so, when Indo did open back up, stratospheres were a common thing in Southeast Asia, in South Korean collections and Japanese collections and stuff like that. They had what they had and, whatever. And of course, these wholesalers over in Indonesia, they know what stuff is retailing for, and, they know, which things, can be sold for a premium. So, they were setting a lot of these aside. And then once Indo opened back up, I had the opportunity where I could, I was looking at buying strats with a friend that had his own shop, and then we're looking for a few other people, and we're looking at like $1,700 or $1,800 landed, per polyp, whatever. I did not do that. I'm glad to say. And, the fact is that, there's been a slow trickle, and obviously people are a lot more conscientious or being cautious about trying to propagate these things. So you see an abundance of, stratosphere zoanthids available. And like I said, if anyone's interested, I know a guy, and he asked me, Jay, are you ready for something? I'm like, no, I want to see how much lower this is going to go before I get on board.
It's like crypto. It's all just funny money and people trying to pump and dump and hoarding stuff. And then
hey, you want to invest
some regular, I can't even. Some regulation hits and the entire thing crashes in on itself.
It's NFTs of coral.
Exactly. Just what I was going to say, whether it's crypto or it's an NFT, in this case, it's a live animal. So there's that whole element of like, oh, maybe it'll die, and that'll be even more valuable for the people that still have it. But yeah, when you speculate on this stuff, certainly that can happen. And so that's one of the more unfortunate trends. But obviously, I feel like we're reaching a saturation point where, there's as much readily aquacultured stuff as there are buyers for it. And so that's why, with like zoanthids, they depreciate in value so quickly that people that are trying to do it, they get a polyp, they run the price into the ground, and then it no longer really has any value. But the really unfortunate thing at the heart of that is that we should be buying this stuff because we want to grow it out into a large colony, because the journey is going to provide us joy in taking care and seeing it grow and get big. And then just the achievement from like having taken a small thing and grown into a bigger thing, which is really, what the heart of the hobby was, until probably the last dozen years or so, when suddenly we moved to branding and naming and, this, that, and whatever. And so that's why, like, on some of the stuff I have, like, I'm starting to move zoanthids back up into my display now. And there's some stuff where, like, it might ultimately end up being a $5,000 or $6,000 colony of something. But I'm going to leave it alone because, like, that's what I want, and that's what I want to have in there. And that being said, I will have a backup colony down in my farm that I'll continue to prune and, send stuff out into the world. But, yeah, that's the tough thing about speculating. And that's how, this hobby, it's that achievement, it's a challenge, it's the patience, it's the consistency. We're rewarded when our stuff does well, like, you get that baby purple tang that's like an inch and a half, and you raise it into, a big bowl that's, 7 or 8 inches long, just looks like purple velvet and what, and so it's the same thing with any of these corals, taking little frags and growing out onto colonies. But, everyone has a frag tank now. And I mean, very obviously I have a display and I have a farm. So, I'm also a party to this. But I am trying to grow stuff out into, large, beautiful colonies as well.
Nice. A little bit of both, right?
Well, that was very soapboxy, so I hope that people don't find me insufferable.
No, the long and the short of it is, if you can afford to do so, just sell your corals for slightly less. You're still going to make money, and they will sell faster. I'll guarantee you that. I sold my outer chaos for $7 a polyp, and it moves like candy. I can't grow them fast enough.
And you're getting that stuff back out there into the world. So, and that's the thing, I was talking about that before with those high-end strains that disappear, where people want such a premium, and then they never get, really broadly out there into the community. And then you have a handful of people holding them. And then if they all, encounter a problem or run to a brick wall, it can lead to, stuff like no longer being available. And really that might be the most rewarding part of aquaculture and cultivating this stuff, is the fact that you're getting it back out there, you're getting into the hands of someone where it's going to do something, it's going to do better than something that's like maricultured, that a reef didn't need to get destroyed to get this like little lump of marine tissue into someone's hands. And I don't know, that's what does it for me anyhow. So that's awesome that you're slinging utter chaos for $7 a pound.
How do you handle people buying your stuff and then reselling it for more? Like, has that ever happened to you?
Is that to me or to Billy?
Both of you, either
I
of
don't
you.
sell enough for it to be an issue. It bothers some people, but I don't really care, because that's not why I'm in the hobby. I'm not here to squeeze every single dollar out of people. I normally won't do that, or I won't sell to that person again, just because I'm also not in the hobby to fund someone else's business. But it's hard to keep track of, and I don't really care enough to actively float it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably generally a good perspective to have on it. So what I'll say is that, what I've actively been fragging and selling stuff since 2012 or 2013. In that course of time, I've probably worked with 7 to 8 local fish stores. Some have come, some have gone, some are still around. Some I regularly, sell stuff to. Others, periodically, they just want to spice up their holdings or whatever. And then there's probably another half dozen, what I would call remote vendors or whatever, where, they'll pop up every so often and they'll want X number of pieces. And, so what I'll say is this. That being the case, I work with these vendors, and I respect brick and mortars, and it's a business model where it's tough out there for them. Your brick and mortar, people can order stuff from BRS, have it sent directly to their door. At this point, the brick and mortar is relegated really to the house is burning down. Or, you don't want to make your own RO water. You want to get pre-made RO water, or buying livestock. And, the margin on dry goods for those businesses is so thin. And then livestock, obviously, they're trying to stay competitive with online vendors. But by the same token, and I know this from years and years of working in stores and stuff, is that, generally livestock is a largely losing proposition, especially when you're direct shipping or whatever, because stuff dies, and it is the most unfortunate thing about the hobby. So that being the case, I have these relationships I've cultivated over long periods of time with vendors, that is local fish stores and stuff where, I have a number that's favorable to them. But also a number where I am very comfortable with. And, it can get a little bit more complicated when it's a little bit more high-end Zoa. But, I understand that I need to leave some meat on the bone for them so that they can turn around and actually get their price for it. That being the case, I don't have regular hobbyists coming over to my house and, buying 50 or 100 frags at a time, right? And by that same token, especially during the pandemic, I really dialed down the number of people that I had coming over to visit. Now, in my forever home here, I'm fortunate that I have an external entrance. It's double dead bolted, video recorded, whatever. So don't anyone try anything fishy. But no,
No one break the tree's house for zoas.
you know, the fact is that, you know, the zoanthus and just reefing in general, I love it. It's part of my life. It's something that I do. I also have a 2-year-old and a soon-to-be 4-year-old. I have a wife. I have a day job where I'm responsible for, you know, 30 hours a week and stuff. So I love talking to people. I've really enjoyed, you know, doing these podcasts with you guys. But having someone come over for, you know, $40 or $50 worth of coral, which I totally respect. And that's exactly where I started too, going to people's houses and buying a frag or two and, you know, blowing the 30 or 40 bucks I had to spend. That just doesn't, you know, it's just not really workable for me anymore, like with the kids and stuff like that. So having those vendors where, you know, they'll take the pieces whenever. And then I still, you know, I post on Reef to Reef, and I have shipping lockdown that's very easy to do once you learn how to do it. And then like even this past weekend, I had a friend meet me down at the local fish store. We did our swap. I picked up something from the store, you know, whatever. Those sorts of situations, because I have had people understand that, like, you know, my kids take their nap at 1 p.m. I'll be there at 1:30, and then it becomes 1:45. Then it becomes 2. Then it becomes 2:30. Then it becomes 3. Then I had to stop at a fish store, so I'm going to be there around 4. And this is what actually happened. The person ended up coming around like 5:45, and I've you know, pissed away an entire afternoon. So
I hate that so much when that happens.
yeah, and so that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I also had another fellow who's nice enough. Came over, he wanted to get something. He was admiring some Blue Ridge corals, so I'm like, yeah, you know, whatever. Tossed it in a bag, gave it to him. You know, as what I thought was going to be a freebie. And then he like looked around a little bit more. He's like, okay, well, I tell you what, I'm going to come back for XYZ. And it's like, buddy, you know, I know that you're new to this, whatever. And I'm happy to like toss you a freebie, especially that Blue Ridge coral, because he's totally into it. And it's a brown coral, but it can be interesting under the right circumstances.
It's pretty cool. The way it grows. It's engrossing everything.
I have one of those, but it's not doing so great.
They're super aggressive at crusters.
They are. That's a prime candidate for those aqua rocks. They have single like frag holders, and so yeah, you just put one of those guys on the back of the aquarium, and you know, the growth pattern is really cool. But yeah, that stuff is like pavona, where it can encrust and be very aggressive. So.
Very aggressive, yeah.
But yeah, so that's why at the end of the day, like selling stuff and, you know, whatever, like I look at those vendors and I want them to be successful, because people go to their local fish stores to be inspired, although more and more people are going to social media and looking there too, whatever. But yeah, so like in those situations, like that's totally comfortable. And I'm totally cool with that. I know that they're going to do a 3 to 4 time markup. I know that they're going to have some loss, you know, so that being the case, like I'm cool with that. As far as like selling to other collectors and other hobbyists and stuff like that, I feel like I've either been very lucky or I'm just very fortunate, or maybe people are just better than than we collectively give our people credit for. Or maybe it's just a people in the Midwest sort of thing. But I've never sold something to somebody and then had them turn around and like put a couple extra zeros on it and you know, sell it for, you know, way more or anything like that. I know that is part of the hobby, and I know people do that. One of my buddies who's a stick guy, he sold this like colony that was just ridiculous. I think it was at Wrap or something. He sold it to a bigger name guy who, you know, took it back, cut it down, and then, you know, put a couple extra zeros on it and sold it, and, you know, whatever. And so that sort of thing is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, really, really. I don't know. It's some mixed feelings all over for me personally. You're right. Like, I kind of agree with everything you said, especially about the fact that like it strengthens, or well, we look at it is that it strengthens the people around you.
All right, and it's one of those things where when you're buying from a vendor, like, call me crazy. And obviously we can't do this in all like phases of our life. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to shop at like any stores or anything like that. But you want to like the people that you're giving your money to. And if you're swapping with other people, you should want to have a good, relationship with that person. And I feel like that's a mutually sustaining sort of thing. So like I was talking about before, where, I've got, friends all across the country at this point where, sometimes like they might drop off for a few months, but then we can pick right back up, sit down at a table and, like work out some mutually beneficial swaps and stuff like that. And, that's just one more thing that I really, really do appreciate about the hobby. So
Exactly.
It's one of those things where people can be so frustrating, but then when you're able to strip away a lot of the other stuff, like the stuff that draws us to this hobby, you're surprised because even people, where they might be like more money oriented or whatever, like I think that same passion is there. It may not run as deep in everybody, but I feel like at least on some level it's present,
Yeah.
And again, I'm sure guys that, do cockfighting probably say the same thing. So
That's true. That's true. We're going to do 1 or 2 more questions before wrapping it up, mainly because the podcast is going longer than we usually have them. But that's the thing with the hobby. It's so addicting. You can go on and on and on about it nonstop.
that's the problem with having me as your guest is that, like I said, captive audiences and big stages is not a great recipe for me. So
Nah, we appreciate having you. We really are happy to help you. Let's do the next question. Question from Enlighten Oneself is, how can I save a suffocating Zoa? Is there any safe way to cut it out? And then can they be pruned back from the main rock? Kind of as a way to keep them under control.
Okay, so when we say suffocating, like what is
I think zoas that are growing underneath, right? Or zoas that are growing, or that being suffocated by other coral, by other zoas, I think.
by other zoas. So, stuff is going to grow through stuff and yeah, I don't know. Cause so the thing is, I've had experience with this with flame clove polyps where I actually had them growing through a zoanthid colony, and I went in there with a pair of tweezers and I got the runner and I stripped them all off. And in doing so, I actually irritated those zoanthids and I lost a lot of them. So when you've got them running into each other, I don't know that I can advise like, you should do this or should do that. That's what I was talking about far earlier in the podcast, is that with some of the stuff, like, it's all transient, it's all passing, once they've grown together and they're starting to grow through each other, you can pull out you can use like, tweezers or whatever, and you can like pull out the offending ones. But at some point they're going to grow back and then they're going to grow through, and they're going to do what they're going to do anyway. So, as for the second part of that, can they be pruned back from the main rock as a way to keep them under control? Look, like, not that I'm particularly in the business of killing zoanthids, even though I guess I sort of am in a way. Calc paste, killing your pumps, calc paste, and then just waiting a little bit for the kelp to do its work, and then going in with a siphon, cleaning out the mess, and then running a bag of ChemiPure is probably going to be about your best way to manage that. When you start talking about zoanthids, and if they're on a rock and you're in there with a tool and you're mangling them, you're more likely to create problems than you are to successfully get them out of a place. So yeah, I mean, kelp paste, or if you want to use Joe's juice or, something like that or whatever, and then like siphoning out the mess, that's generally the best way if you need to try and keep them contained.
Yeah. Medication, I think, is always risky though, especially with that. Like, have you ever had an incident where you've done that and you've lost a little more than you wanted to?
Well, no, I mean, so in probably 2 aquariums ago when we were in the apartment, when I was in the 75 gallon, that's when I had a lot of the stuff up on the rock work. And no, I would just let stuff grow through stuff and, whatever. And that's just the way it is, I've never actively, outside of what I was describing with those flame clove polyps, I've never actively like tried to, curtail like where zoanthid was growing or anything like that.
That's true. We can't control where they grow. They're just going to go where they want.
They're going to go where they want. You're more likely to create problems if you're in there like trying to rip stuff out or,
That's why you got to plan it out before you put the coral on the rock, right? Like before you glue the frag, you've got to think about how much space to give it or how much space you're going to want to give it before you end up in a situation where you have to cut the coral or try to risk losing the coral in order to try back.
And, that's something I think we talked about in the first part of the podcast was, having a goal, knowing what you want to achieve, knowing what that should look like, understanding that like part of the journey is like growing the stuff out to getting to that point. But then, once you achieve that, like it is going to continue to grow. And, how many of us have an SPS where we would have liked it to have gone one way, but that goes in the opposite direction? Or, you have like a branching, Euphilia, and you're like, oh, I want to do this, but instead it just does like a perfect globe sort of growth. So yeah, that's one of those things where I feel like if you're actively trying to curtail or contain a zoanthid, I feel like that's a losing battle. And in a very minor way, because this is something that just frustrates me to no end, there's a small chance you might, get yourself palate toxin, but like not really.
Do you give do you have a rule of thumb when you glue those on your scape, right, on your rock? Do you have a rule of thumb where you give them X amount of space? Like how much space do you usually give them?
No,
because they're going to grow out eventually. So
right. So kind of like I was describing, after we moved like 2 years ago, and then I downsized this 125. My rockscapes are from like 2011, and then I have a small pile that I've sort of built up. So I haven't been completely set with that. I've tweaked it over and over again. Finally, I have it how I like it. So now that's sort of set up. The one rockscape that also contains my arch, that piece right now has got a bunch of Euphilia that are kind of growing on it. And then I'm dealing with that pesky like turf algae that's on the upper part. Once I'm able to get that fully settled, I want to put SPS, some more SPS up there, which leaves me the other rock structure, which is like vaguely mushroom shaped. It's got a piece that sort of looks like an open palm with like an extended thumb that's coming off on one side. And so that was the one that I traditionally kept zoanthids on. That was one where, after the move, I had some die off there. There's like orange dragon eyes. There's some armor of God. There's some orange bam bams and a few other ones that are starting to come back on that. That rock has never been, like dried out or anything like that. So there's a lot of sponge. There's some vermitids on there. And then I was mentioning Pavona before. I have this one. I think it's Pavona cubiensis. And it's sort of, the growth sort of looks like dragon scales. But it is just a noxious encruster. And I've actually killed it off repeatedly with like calc paste over the years. And it still comes back from like the most minuscule, like, undersides, whatever. So I need to get active here and finally put the nail in the coffin and kill all that stuff off. And then that rock, I'm going to start. It's my hope to be able to like throw a bunch of different zoanthids on there, kind of get that growing back out. But really with the display, like I've been putting a lot of them that I've been bringing up duplicates and ones that I like and kind of putting them on the floor. And honestly, I'm probably going to keep them on the floor in this new display as well, because they do look really cool with some of the mushrooms. And I'm an elegance coral fan, so I have a couple of those as well. And yeah, I think I'm just going to keep them on the substrate.
Yeah, that works. It works. All right, last question is, And it's a very big one because a lot of people don't know about it because it pertains to certain things, like to a lot of coral in the hobby. And that's, can zoas be copyrighted, or how do they get reputable breeders like Jason Folks? You know, how do they get new strains? Are they collected wild, or do they come in from this mutations in display tanks?
Yeah, you know, this kind of feeds in with that our discussion on the Reef to Reef. And, you know, I'll try and wrap it up since I know it's going to be our bedtime, so I'm probably a little long in the tooth at this point. But no, so, you know, obviously zoanthids are largely collected out of the ocean, and, you know, these are brought in. In this day and age, you know, if stuff is coming through an importer and it goes to like a facility, you know, in Southern California there, and then, you know, people with long-standing relationships, you know, vendors and whatnot, they're able to reach out, and, you know, in often cases they'll get to cherry pick stuff. And then with, you know, with direct shipping and stuff, like my friend that owns a store, you know, he gets near WYSIWYG where they'll send him an Excel file, you know, with like 400 like pictures of zoanthids. And then he can, you know, pick out stuff and it's WYSIWYG or it's near WYSIWYG, whatever. And so like he'll take a flyer on a bunch of stuff. And, you know, the good stuff people will take, i.e. they'll take it, they'll set it aside, and they'll just let it grow. The usual cannon fodder, you know, it'll go out and it'll get sold, or it'll get cut up, mounted on frag plugs and sold, whatever. But, you know, all these like neat pieces that are cherry picked, you know, some of the folks, and once again, tried to avoid, you know, like naming names exactly, or I guess even that's got kind of an insidious connotation. But, you know, basically, like, there are people where this is a Jason Fox, you know, such and such, whatever. You know, after a period of time, those people are then able to take that coral that they cherry picked, and then they can like start releasing frags, whatever. And, you know, that's sort of like how the hype gets built. So, you know, outside of the GMK, which is a golden basket, you know, strain, at least initially, you know, the last group of like must-have zoas came from that Shane Backer fellow, SSB Corals or whatever. And that was stuff like, you know, the Dragon Glass and like Oscar the Grouch. And there's a couple of those that are really hard to find. You know, and of course, different growers have relationships with each other. So I think Golden Basket and that Shane Backer fellow, you know, I think there's a certain amount of back and forth because they both had like Aphrodites and like Marvin the Martians and stuff like that. So that's really, you know, the long and short of it is that, you know, very early on pieces, you know, those nice pieces are like set aside and people with connections are able to get them. But that's also why like my friend that owns Blue Line, you know, he does, and that's Blue Line Coral. It's a local store here in Naperville. If you go in and look, like, because he does do a lot of direct shipping, like he gets a lot of like cool stuff that doesn't have names, and you know, you're not paying an arm and a leg for it. But there are some gorgeous pieces where then you can take those, put them in your tank if you can get them through, you know, the quarantine and, you know, that like, you know, 8-9 month, like kind of, you know, break even point, whatever, you know, you can end up with some really unique stuff. And there's more than a few in my collection that are wilds that came in through him, and I aquacultured and I, you know, kept them and been able to propagate them and, you know, get them out there. Two of them that I really, well, there's three of them. I've got one where it's called a Maisie Daisy. I named it after my daughter, and it's like a bright like orange center. It's kind of got like a purplish body to it, and then it's got a crazy looking skirt. It's kind of like a My Clementine, just, you know, on, I don't know. It's really neat though. That, or there's like another one, a speckled hyposta, named after the guardian flower or whatever. Where those are pretty, or even like the vampire slayers that I have. There's any number of different vampire slayers out there. I feel like the idea is pretty good on these. As a wild strain that came in, but they're really sharp. They're bright green and bright yellow and whatever. So that's really people with a keen eye. And then obviously there's some vendors where they are trying to maximize their dollar, but then you've got other shops like Blue Line where you can go in there and he's just trying to sell Zoa frags. So you can you can very easily find gems that are unnamed. That just need a little care and attention, and then over the course of time, that can turn into something really special.
Yeah, that's cool. I would love to be the person that gets the first one, just to watch it grow out like that.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, it's also pretty nerve-wracking. I've had a number of malls recently where, and campfires where they've been absolutely gorgeous, and then I get 3 or 4 months in, they have a bad weekend, and then suddenly I'm dipping them every other night and stressing about the fact that these things disappear off the face of the earth and it's going to be my fault.
Oh man, the stress and the pressure. It all goes hand in hand.
But yeah, that's the long and short on how some of this stuff gets out there. And, like we were talking about before, there's some of these strains where they're one and done where, you'd think that they come from more than a 2 by 2 foot square section of the ocean. But they've never found any more of the original Krakatoas, circa 2012. They've never found more of the original emperors. The ultimate chaos. These are ones where they found them. They were out there. They were in the hobby for a little while, and then they're just gone. That's why.
The ocean's huge, who knows what will happen? Who knows? Because, like I said before, we've only found 30% of the ocean so far. And there's literally so much potential for thousands of zootypes that we don't know about yet. And for zootypes to come in. I think that's pretty cool. That's my favorite thing about the hobby.
And, that's the other thing, too, is that, collection places open and close. We've talked about Hawaii. We've talked about Indo. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, the Great Barrier Reef and Caledonia and Lord Howe Island, those were closed to collection. So there were some fish. There's a fish called an old wife that was only collected in Australia, and they were incredibly, valuable, and they're really crazy looking. But they were so rarely collected because they're out of Australia. And then even acans, it blew people's minds, but, acans used to sell for $150, $200 for 2 or 3 polyps.
Way back
that green and purple variety back in the early 2000s because they just weren't collecting from there. So it'll definitely be interesting to see, as other places perhaps open for collection, but then you also have a little bit of regret in that it's another natural place that's being plundered. So,
Do you think it's plundering or is it more of conservation? When I think about the Great Barrier Reef and the fact that we're losing square feet of this, if not yards of it every day, is it bad for us to take samples of the coral there and to keep them in home aquariums?
I mean, ethically, I don't know. I'd say it's dubious at best. We see these initiatives in Florida where they are actively going out and trying to repopulate portions of the reef with what is it, elkhorn coral, I believe. It's Acropora palmata, I believe, which is a quintessential Caribbean coral. And so, they're obviously using principles and things that they've learned through aquaculturing to try and repopulate portions of this ocean. But, I don't know. You think about the fact that we have that great swirling mass of plastic in the middle of the ocean. The ocean acts as both a heat bank and it's also becoming more acidic. And, so I don't know. I'm about to go off the ledge here when I start thinking about some of these things that we're doing. What I'm going to say is that, when it comes to coral, we've commercialized the collecting of it and, whatever. Do I think at these collection points that they're absolutely like stripping things bare and leaving in whatever? No, I don't suspect that they are, but by the same token, like, do any of us really know for sure? And you think about certain areas in the, like the Philippines where they were using cyanide to catch fish.
Oh man,
in the 90s, and obviously that is something where there was. Sorry,
they're still using cyanide to catch fish in some areas.
In some areas.
It's illegal; they're not supposed to. But like,
right, there was a concentrated effort even before it was illegalized to introduce net catching, to talk about just how destructive, cyanide is, not only to the fish, which is ultimately going to die, but also to the reef as a whole. So.
Nobody wins. Nobody wins except for the collector. Nobody wins when that happens.
I mean, do we really want to be going out to nature and like stunning stuff with poison, that will ultimately kill it just so that we can capture it, ship it across an ocean, and put it in someone's aquarium for them to enjoy for a couple of weeks? I don't know. That's one of those things where like I support biota. I hope that they continue to. And really, all of these aquaculture facilities that are working on the fish, at some point, you pay a premium for that, but, it's good on two levels because you're not removing viable animals from the gene pool. And you're also, obviously not just taking stuff out of the ocean. So, as far as corals and stuff, well, they know that they can do better by mariculturing stuff, because when you go out and you're collecting, it's anyone's guess like how well you're going to do versus some of these mariculture facilities where they just have these racks and they're just sitting there with the stuff growing on it, and it's predictable and they can know what to expect. So even if it's not 100% aquaculture when it comes to coral, even mariculture is more ethical than like straight up collecting. But obviously, we have limited knowledge about how any one thing is, collected, and the overall impact that's going to have on the local environment. So,
yeah, perfect.
Sorry, guys, don't mean to, be like a bummer here. But that's why, I said before, and I'll say
reality things. It's reality things, and the more that people get aware of it and know what's going on, like it's one step closer to actually fixing it. Yeah.
No, and so that's the thing. That's why we have an ethical obligation to try and make the best choices possible when we're buying fish, when we're buying coral, when we're putting in our aquarium. Stuff is going to die. That's the fact of the matter. And that's why we have to make any sort of loss meaningful. That's our obligation to this stuff, and beyond that, if dogs and cats were treated the way that, aquarium fish and stuff are treated, and not to say that they aren't occasionally, but there would be a national outcry, basically. So I don't know. These are certainly like lofty things to consider, because I want to do this stuff and I want to enjoy this stuff, but you also have to acknowledge your responsibility.
As reefers or as people that are in charge of another life, we are responsible for making sure that we give that life the best care and the best environment to be in that we can. It's like the ethical responsibility that comes with being a fish keeper. And as all high and mighty as it sounds, it's not fair for us to take something out of the ocean and put it in a box, just have it stress out and die, right? Like, give it the best home that you can when you put it in your tank, and don't like try to skip on providing the care for it that you can.
Well, and so that's obviously, with coral and even zoanthids in particular, perhaps, but, having a goal, knowing what you want to achieve, and just putting yourself in a good position to be successful and recognizing what that roadmap should look like. That's what we should all really be trying to do. And, don't make impulsive decisions,
Actually, before we go, we're going to do the myth of the week real quick, because that's something that we usually try to do for every episode, and then we can kind of call it. This week's myth of the week is something that I've read about in several sources, and I've heard mixed reviews, but I've never actually delved deep enough to find something solid on it. But is vitamin C good for zoas?
So we talked a little bit about that before. My experience over the course of 8 to 9 months, where I was part of my regiment, I did not notice an impactful difference. I am looking at implementing that again now in my current system, now that 2 years post move, full maturity on the system, nutrition is dialed in, everything is as it should be. I'm willing to give it another run at it and see, because as I mentioned, my buddy Fahad, Ice House on Reef to Reef there, he had incredible success with it. So I guess at least for my input, it's going to continue to be a myth for now. I don't know. I can report back in 6 months and tell you.
All right, we'll check in with you 6 months from now on the dot. But yeah, that's today's episode of Slice of the Reef. Unfortunately, Billy couldn't make it to the end, but we really appreciated having LittleBigReef or Jay joining us. If you're interested in buying coral from him, zoas, seeing what he has, you can follow him on Reef to Reef on Instagram. His handle is LittleBigReef.
I'm sorry. And yeah, no, that's the thing. At the end of the day, if you have questions or if you have comments or feedbacks, or if I said something that was patently wrong and you want to make me aware of it, I am very responsive on Instagram. I do love talking to folks. Obviously, I'm pretty passionate about the hobby as a whole. Zoanthids just happen to be my area of interest, but I assure you, I'm a very normal person. And yes, I do regularly have batches available. It is during the summer, but I actually do have a batch posted up right now. And yeah, so, if I can be a useful resource to anyone, please, feel free to reach out to me.
Like he said, his handle is LittleBigReef. It'll be in the comments of whatever episode of whatever, platform you're listening to this on. He is on Instagram. He is on Reef to Reef. He is active. His posts are really cool. And if you just want to see the greatest variety of zoas out there, if you want the inspiration and just to see what kind of zoas are out there, check out his Instagram. He's always posting cool pictures of different kinds of zoa strains. He's always posting cool batches that he has available for sale. Feel free to reach out to him. Feel free to reach out to us, and then through us we can go to him. And of course, Billy.
Easy reefing. Thank you for listening to another episode of Slice of the Reef,
your number one podcast for all things fishy, with your hosts, Giancarlo and Billy. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else that podcasts are held. That way, you'll never miss an episode. If you want to be a part of our podcast, join us on discord.xyz/Slice of the Reef, where we'll be recording in front of a live audience. We also give you a moment at the end of every episode for a live Q&A session, and we're very interactive with our fans, so we'd love for you to join. You can also check out our website for articles, guides, calculators, and information on our upcoming episodes at sliceofthereef.org. Hope to see you guys soon.
Farewell and easy reefing.